Episode 9 of the BTB Project. Today's guest is the greatest college tennis coach of all time, and arguably the greatest college coach of all time. As the men's tennis coach at Stanford University, in 38 years his team won 17 NCAA national championships. He holds the record of 776 wins to only 148 losses. He has coached 10 NCAA singles champions, 7 doubles champions, and 50 All-Americans, and 9 players who have reached top 15 in the ATP World Singles Rankings. Author of Anatomy of a Champion, a book that focuses on championship traits from 189 of his former players, Coach Dick Gould, welcome to the BTB Project.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby.
Welcome to the BTB Project, designed to empower listeners to identify their why and to live their best lives no matter the circumstances. My name is Coleman Gerhardt. A former athlete and motivational coach, I've had the opportunity to inspire thousands through my story and help accomplish what they are built to be. You'll be encouraged by each and every episode, and let's get into it.
Yeah, when I blow up, I'ma soar high like Peter Pan. In real life, be living out my dreams. If I'm waking up, it's in a foreign land.
Coach Gould, I am humbled and honored to have you join me today on the BTB Project. Welcome.
Thank you, Coleman. Gosh, what a great pleasure to be here. First thing I asked you, what's BTB? And, I got a great reply, and it fascinated me.
Absolutely. It's, one of those moments that as a tennis player and someone that has been around the game as long as you have, it's amazing to me to know all the lives you've impacted, and really impressed with what you've done with this book, Anatomy of a Champion, and being able to read some of the stories about how you've impacted them as a coach, not just on the tennis court, but more importantly in their life. And I guess really the first question I'm going to ask you is, how many times have you done an interview with somebody that has indirectly been impacted by you? Meaning, I know that you have great relationships with your players and the ones that said what they said about you, but I've been impacted by one of your former players. And I just love for you to maybe share a little bit about how you came across the BTB podcast and a little bit about one of my greatest mentors.
Happy to, Colin, but I think that I'll turn that around a little bit. First of all, as a coach, it's always a teacher in essence. As you know, it's always a two-way street. And oftentimes the coach or the teacher gains twice as much from his students as they gain from him. And having interacted with them, the tough times, the challenging times they weren't listening, I couldn't understand why. Times maybe I wasn't listening like I should have been, which is key. But then every so often a gem comes along. And you just mentioned one of them, and that was Jeff Salzenstein, one of my all-time favorite players. Jeff came in as a really young kid. He was I'm not sure he had reached puberty by the time he started college. He was but he was at one of our camps, the Junior Davis Cup camp, the national camp. And you could see he really was well taught by his dad and Miles up him a lot. And he was really well grounded in terms of his fundamentals. And even though he was too young and physically not able to serve in volley, and it was a matter of time until his growth caught up with him, which is often the case in college.
Right.
That he could change his game and really develop it into an all-court player. And that's when he made his great strides. But people like Jeff are the kinds of people who make my life blessed and make me a better person, hopefully, along the way.
No, that's a tremendous testament to knowing all the players that you've coached, to know the impact that Jeff had on you. And, it's amazing because him and I are complete opposites. As I shared with you before we hopped on the podcast, I struggled more with overweight and trying to find my way as a tennis player by trimming down. And Jeff and I always kid about how he wish he could have, gained the pounds that I did back then. And, he eventually did and had a tremendous career. And, I was very fortunate enough to, have him on the podcast, and really neat to, have that opportunity as a Colorado native to speak with someone who's, played at the highest level. And, I know you got to listen to it, and I'm curious, based off of not just your time at Stanford, but when you listened to that podcast, what were some highlights that kind of resonated with you?
Well, first of all, so many of my players had the benefit of having great parents. And Jeff was certainly one of those. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeff's dad early on, but he and his wife had split by then. Jan, I got to know really well.
Yep.
And then she married Miles Cortez, who played in one of Trinity's great teams. And also an incredible person. So Jeff really had three great role models in his life. And it's obvious from the kind of person he is, a caring individual. He himself now is one of the nation's best teachers. He listens well. He was on a great undefeated team at Stanford. We don't have those very often. Anybody does. Nobody does. And he just kind of blossomed, I think, physically, and that gave more confidence in terms of his mental toughness on the court. And it kind of all happened at once. And he took these pieces of his game, which he was just not physically able to put together when he was 14, 15 years old. By the time he was 18, he could start putting them together. And that's often the case for these kids. When they get to college, they've learned one way, they're afraid to change it, they're doing pretty well, but it's only part of the game.
Yeah.
And so getting them, when their physical status allows it, being able to have them add the aggressive game, the serve and volley, put it all together instead of just keeping it in pieces, really is a joy for me to watch and do. And we were successful at that. And Jeff just ate it up, and he had the great foundation that made it possible.
Excellent. And, I want to obviously go back and dig deeper into what makes you tick, Coach, and kind of get a true understanding of your why. I've shared this in previous episodes, but I believe a well-established why can overcome any how. And there's so much peaks and valleys that you've experienced in your coaching career. And I want to start with core values. You mentioned in numerous interviews your parents instilled some core values that helped you along the way. Would you mind sharing those core values and maybe what the most important value is that you still lean on today?
Yeah, Coleman, I don't know that I ever thought of them as core values as growing up. And you're a teacher, you're a coach, and all of us are teachers or coaches in some shape or form. With our families, if we were lucky enough to have young children, of them, for them, in our business relationships, in our friendships, and we don't mean to be, but we are. I think the most effective way to teach any core values is simply by the way you live, by example. And I think that's just such a critical part of leadership. You can't be someone you're not. You have to be yourself. But what you do by example, you can't say, keep the courts clean when you leave. You have to pick up the papers yourself. And they see you doing that. Then all of a sudden they do that. You can't say, it's my living room, keep it clean. It's important to me that you do so. Doesn't mean a thing to them. But when they see you as a leader taking pride in how a place looks, then all of a sudden it starts to ring home to them too as well. I think that's really important. My folks divorced when I was in college, right when I started college. And I knew it was coming and I didn't know when it was going to happen. But so it wasn't a great traumatic experience per se, but both independently were incredible people. My dad was a farmer. He was at Stanford and studying economics and pre-law, and then depression hit. And so his father, my grandfather, gave him a little piece of property right next to his property, a farmland. Didn't have anything on it then. It was just a hillside. My dad had to tier it, cultivate it, and plant the lemon trees and grow them. And in the meantime, first couple of years of my life, he was also driving a Chevron truck, a Standard Oil truck, around servicing the farms.
Okay.
And working in them as a mechanic in a Standard Shell station. And so he taught me that you don't get anything if you're not working, and that you have to work. And he didn't tell me that. It was obvious. You work for what you get. Nothing's handed to you. My mom was an actual teacher.
Yeah.
She was substituting as I was growing up, but she was very active in my activities, my sisters and brothers' activities all the way through. By the time I was in high school, she was teaching again full time. I think she was really respected and well liked by her pupils. She brought everything down to a level a little different than teacher-pupil relationship. She kind of got on the same level as the kids, but was still able to hold the respect. One of the key, excuse me, let me go back to the book for a second. I wrote this book, Coleman, because I didn't really, a guy asked me, one of my best friends asked me about halfway through my coaching career. He said, Dick, how do you win so much? And here's a guy who's in the UCLA Baseball Hall of Fame, started a couple of companies in Silicon Valley, was the CEO of the big one when this conversation occurred. He was there during John Wooden's years as a basketball coach. He was surrounded by, in addition to his own athletic successes, the leadership and example set by John Wooden, even though he didn't play basketball. I couldn't answer his question. I said simply, Jack, we get the best players. And he said, well, that's fine, but a lot of teams have good players, and they never win.
Yep.
And yet you manage to win year after year after year. And that really stumped me because I couldn't think of why or how this might have happened. If I were to try to write a book and say, this is how it all happened, I couldn't do that.
No.
And I taught a few more years. We won a few more championships. And then I became director of tennis for 14 years and was able to implement some programs and things within a program that I didn't have time to do when I was coaching.
Yeah.
Very fulfilling 14 years. And then finally, after 52 years, I retired. I started working as a full-time volunteer, concussion education.
Yeah.
So a whole different switch that way. But it also gave me a little bit of time when I retired to think about what made us tick. Why did we win? I wasn't a very good player when I started. I was a good player, but I wasn't a great player. And I was always working in the summer on a farm or in the recreation department, teaching swimming, lifeguarding, teaching tennis from about 14 years on up.
Yep.
So I never played tennis in the summer. So I didn't play enough tournaments to ever be ranked in Southern California, which is not an easy job in itself.
Right. Yeah.
In those days. Finally, my last year in the juniors, in 1800s, I played just enough tournaments in the spring and a couple in the summer where I could get a ranking. I was ranked 18th, and I am very proud of that ranking. But when I came to Stanford, I was on the freshman team, which we had in those days. Freshmen could not play in the varsity. And I was 5 or 6 in the freshman team, which is not going to set the world afire. But I got better every day by playing every day.
Right.
In high school, I played different sports. Basketball would end in March, just before tennis season started. Go right into the other, play for 3 months, and that was pretty much it. I didn't really have that much experience as a player, and I kind of developed it as I went, a style of play and so on. But
you and I relate. I started playing tennis when I was 14 years old.
Well, I started at 11, so I had a couple of years head start on you, and I also had great coaches along the way.
And that's what I want to go back to is tell me about 10, 11. You're on a farm. Your mom's driving you to what I believe is a swim lesson, and a conversation was had about, you got to try this tennis thing sometime, right? And the troubling part for you was if you didn't try it, you weren't going to be able to ride horses in the summer. So I want to know what would happen, Coach Gould, if you decided to keep driving by that tennis court and, I don't know, maybe never came across tennis. Would you still be on a horse today?
That's great. Well, actually, that story is actually pretty accurate. There was a farmer lived fairly close. We were 7 or 8 miles from where our little ranch was. And he had a swimming pool and a tennis court on his property, which in those days was a little bit unusual. Either one of them was unusual. We would drive to swimming lessons. We had a reservoir in our property. My folks didn't want me to drown in it. So we took group swimming lessons at this other farm. And on the way to that swimming pool, we would drive right by the tennis court. All of a sudden, out of the blue, she said, I think it'd be a great idea if you took a tennis lesson. And I don't know whether it was a joint decision with my dad or not. He played football at Stanford a little bit. He was on the scrub team for a guy named Pop Warner, a really legendary coach.
Yes,
and wrestled a little bit at Stanford. My mom was very active in the women's sports. They weren't formal teams as they are nowadays, but My folks were athletic and played sports, but neither of them really played tennis. I really didn't want to be in this little farming community, farming and oil it was. I didn't want to be in this little community of Ventura in Southern California wearing little white pants around. And so I said, no, I'm not going to take a tennis lesson. She said, well, do you want to ride your horse this summer? I said, I'll try a tennis lesson.
Right. And I think I got the next piece pretty accurate when you did show up to that lesson and moments before you took the court, there were a couple girls that were 14 years old before you that might have changed your mind about tennis. Can you maybe share a little bit about that moment?
I'm sitting there kind of sulking, sorry for myself for having to be here. And the teaching pro could see that. He knew he was stuck with me next. But on the court before my lesson started, another lesson was just finishing up, 2 14-year-old girls, little twins. And they were pretty hot. And I was 11-year-old. The hormones were just starting. They had hot pants, they called them in those days, and halter tops. And man, I thought, hey, this sport might not be too bad. Ironically, their brother played at Stanford, which is where my folks both went. And so I had an interest in going there. And it turned out later that the fact he played tennis at Stanford was a big motivating factor for me. Ironically, his daughter played tennis at Stanford, and she was on my wife's first women's championship team of any sport at Stanford. So it's a small world how the world turns and goes around. But my coach was really, really a dynamic teacher, and that was one of the first big life changes in me. It really made me experience how important it was as a teacher to show a passion for your subject matter.
And what I can relate to as well, Coach, is, what you, and a lot of the tidbits that I'm finding about you were from the amazing oral history that was done on you through Stanford. And it was a nice, 6.5 hour listen, but nonetheless, I know that a lot of people have asked you about what you've done and how you've done it. And when I'm talking about what makes you tick, I just think it's really neat how your first coach resonated with you, not necessarily by teaching a forehand or a backhand, but and finding ways to, tie in things that, you were passionate about that maybe had nothing to do with tennis that made tennis something ignite for you. Can you kind of speak to that coaching style?
Sure. He knew I liked sports. And so every ball I hit was equated to another sport. Rocky Marciano was a heavyweight champion of the world at the time. He said, Richard, he says, you step into the hit like Rocky Marciano steps into the punch. And he said this big booming voice, and he got you all excited when he said that. His daughter was a world-class tour player, maybe one of the top 10 players in the world at the time, top 6.
Wow.
Nancy Chaffee. And she married Ralph Kiner, who was the major league batting champion. So he used Ralph as an example. He said, you watch the ball come off the racket like Ralph Kiner watches it come out of the pitcher's hand. You have to watch that ball closely. So all of a sudden, the sissy sport came alive for me. Yeah. And I couldn't wait to leave that lesson, get home, hit the ball against the garage, and it would bounce off the garage onto a gravel driveway, which means it bounced 90 degrees this way, that way, everywhere except towards your racket. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't put my racket down. I kept trying to hit it back and back, and I could not wait for my next lesson. My point is that he made what I was doing exciting by his passion for it and by equating it to something I liked. And that stuck with me forever. And every teaching lesson I ever gave since that time, my goal was through my voice, my actions, never stop talking during a lesson, was to make the experience exciting for my pupil.
Yes.
I'm talking beginning private lessons for little 8-year-old kids, for beginning adults. I'm talking good high school players, great JC players, great college players. Make it exciting what you're doing for them by showing your passion in what you're doing. This was really a big, big lesson for me.
Excellent. And, fast forwarding a little bit when that passion was ignited, I want to hear about Foothills Junior College. I know that you were really proud of those 2 state championships that you won there before being hired at Stanford in 1966. I'd love to hear more about that experience for you, because I came from a school that was a lower end Division I program that had a lot of junior college transfers that would come in after 2 years. And a lot of them were tremendous players. So could you maybe speak to a little bit of that point in your journey?
I went to Stanford majoring pre-law, political science, pre-law. It was my field of study, basically. I wasn't really turned on by it. As I taught more and more in the recreation department in Ventura, both swimming and tennis and lifeguarding, I began to think that I really wanted to be a recreation director, a community recreation director, city director, county director, or something like that. But Stanford didn't have a recreation major, but they did have a physical education major, and that was the closest thing I could find at Stanford that they offered. I didn't want to leave Stanford. 5-year program. And so I took that as my major, finished in 5 years. I started out on a freshman team, about 5 or 6. My sophomore year, I ended up the year number 7, just off the starting lineup, which means you might get into a match or two.
Right.
If you were way ahead or way behind, you might get a chance to play some doubles. I was number 7 again my junior year, and my 6th year I was number 6. I finally made the starting lineup, and I was getting pretty good, actually. Guys I couldn't touch my freshman team I was starting to beat, and I was starting to beat intercollegiate players at Davis Cuppers from other countries that I couldn't stand the same court with before. And it was a 5-year master's program, so I figured out a way, with the help of our dean of students, in those days it wasn't so easy, that I could get into graduate school, work in my master's without graduating from Stanford. I never graduated from Stanford, but I got my master's there in 5 years after my 5th year, and played tennis that 5th year, which was really important to me.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was going into coaching then rather than recreation. And I was able to watch what other coaches did, how they handled their players. I knew what I was going to do to make a living, and that was really, really a helpful thing. That's kind of all evolved, and I got a teaching job at a local high school. I taught in a classroom, health education, sex education, if you wish. That was a blast. We didn't have a really strict syllabus to follow. It was one of the requirements students had to take, and it was really a fun age for these 14, 15-year-olds to be teaching this. And then I taught driver ed, taught a PE class, and I coached freshman, sophomore football, which I learned a really big, important lesson from. And I also coached tennis in the spring. And then right almost across the street, in the meantime, I got a job working in the summers as a teaching professional at a club. Yeah. And I did that on weekends during the school year, and of course, full-time in the summer every day, 7 days a week. And that was literally from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. So my family didn't see much of me.
And I was just going to ask you that. I mean, the lives that you've impacted are outlined in the book, you know.
When I was having a blast, it was just a hobby.
Yeah.
I couldn't call it work. And the club job, you didn't have retainers in those days.
Yeah.
So it was a small club. It had a 50-meter swimming pool and a stables, but it was not a tennis club. It had 2 courts, but all I needed was a court to teach on, but there was people wouldn't join the club because of tennis. So I had to build the program up. And you can't do that if you can't afford to be there if you don't have a retainer and if you're not taking lessons. So I'd sit by the courts all day long. I get the phone name, number and name of everyone who came by the courts and get them on my list and call them, say, hey, we're a little mixer this weekend, come on out. And I'd run it and so on. And we get more and more lessons. And then we got filled up and had to build 2 more courts and 4 more courts and ended up a beautiful tennis club. But that really taught me a lot about promoting the game. In the meantime, in a little triangle from where the high school was to where the club was, the third part of that triangle was where a brand new junior college was, Foothill Junior College. And we had about 120 JCs in the state in those days. They were looking for a tennis coach. So I applied. I actually sat on the athletic director's doorstep until he hired me. Got the job based on my reputation as what I was doing at the club and promotion of tennis and so on.
Yeah.
And took the job over, and I loved it. That was full-time tennis. So I left high school after 2 years, went to the junior college, Foothill College, and absolutely loved it. And I knew the high school players because that district that it drew from, the districts it drew from were the ones I was coaching in and playing against. And so I knew the high school players and giving lessons to a few of them as well. So I attracted the local players. And then I got really lucky because a great player from Germany was brought by pro at a club about 20 miles away to look at the school because he knew he wanted to go to school in the United States and he wasn't quite ready to go to a four-year school. And this guy was really, really good. And he actually turned out winning the state championship and getting to the NCAA quarterfinals for USC.
Wow.
And then another player, Hawaii descent, Rodney Kopp, was number 2 in what was the 1500s that year, a couple of years earlier. He also was looking for a junior college, and he stayed Foothill. So, and he won the state championship. And then the third year, we didn't win it, but we were close. The fourth year it was Raul Contreras, who was the brother of the Mexican Davis Cupper.
Yes.
Who went to Modesto JC. And Raul got to round of 32 at the NCAAs for San Jose State. So he also, and Rodney was round of 16 for San Jose State. So they were players equivalent to the kind of players I wanted to have at Stanford. So I was working with good players.
Yes.
Of course, I was kind of full of myself. I thought I knew it all by then, could work with anybody. But all these guys have their own coaches telling them what to do. And all of a sudden, here's this guy out of nowhere telling them, no, try this or do this or whatever. And so I had to learn a little bit of tact and a little bit of approach, and different people take different approaches. But I really grew a lot in that job. And then my coach retired at Stanford, the one who encouraged me to combine a club job where I could make some money with a teaching job where I had the benefits and so on of a full-time teacher.
Right.
Which was my mode of operation. And it turned out to be a great combination. And so when I went to Foothill, my first question was, will you make me a full-time coach, not half-time like my predecessor?
Yep.
At the same salary I'm making at Foothill? And he said, yes. And I said, plus, if I'm going to stop at the club, I need to use the courts at Stanford to teach. Will you let me do that? And he said, yes. So I was in heaven.
And listen, going to 1966 when you were hired at Stanford, I know that you were really just in the right place at the right time, and they were, looking for someone, and you might have not checked all the boxes, but you just happened to be there and you got hired. But I'm just curious, if you were not hired at Stanford, would you have stayed at a JUCO and had a coaching career for years at that level?
It's a great area. I was at a great club. I love the junior college coaching. We did a lot of great things there. We started a really strong tennis patrons organization to support the area youths, including those of college age who were non-self-supporting, which meant my junior college kids. Exhibitions there to stimulate interest in the area. We had Dennis Ralston, Chuck McKinley when they were Wimbledon number 1 in the world. We had Ponce Gonzalez, Ponce Gura, Rod Laver.
Wow.
All the players playing on wood. And so with 3,000 people. So that was pretty new in that era. And of course, I'd hang in there and play doubles with Segura against Laver, against Gonzalez, and then another local pro. So we did a lot of good things there. And I think that and the fact the manager of Fremont Hills Country Club was a former fraternity brother, albeit a few years earlier, and a great pitcher at Stanford in baseball. He was close to the athletic director then. I think he put a good word or more for me for the Stanford job, and that was a big thing to help me get the job there. But my point was that in the meantime, by starting in the high school in the area, and then in the junior college, the same area, I had a little bit, at least a local reputation, which was a good one. So that really helped me a lot. But to answer your question directly, if I had not been out for the job at Stanford, I'd still be at Foothill. Ironically, when I left Foothill to go to Stanford, my best friend from high school, my doubles partner all through junior high school and high school, the guy who with me started tennis in junior high school in a 7th grade PE class, beginning PE class, although I'd had a couple of private lessons on him from the summer. He had got a teacher and get out. He played at Wyoming on a scholarship.
Okay.
To Washington State, got his master's degree, and he was coaching tennis, teaching high school in Costa Mesa, and coaching basketball down there. And he loved it. Orange County, beautiful area. And I said, why don't you just come up and look at this job? He said, no, I love it. I don't want another job. I'm going to stay here forever. Well, I talked him into coming up, and he was offered the job on the spot and thought about it and took it.
Okay.
So we became business partners and some other stuff we did. And so it was nice he's still my best friend to this day.
That's awesome. And, getting to, being hired at Stanford and, starting this amazing legacy that you have today, it reflects back to a quote that I came across that you were really intrigued by from, I believe, Al Davis with the Oakland Raiders, that talked about the Red Queen that told Alice, you got to run fast, and once you get there, you got to run twice as fast. And I also want to say that you have been adamant about the importance of teaching people that it's okay to make mistakes. So to know that you're in this position and maybe not qualified, you feel like you're a nobody or whatnot, how did you run fast those first couple of years at Stanford, and what were some mistakes you made that you had to overcome?
I made plenty of mistakes. I think, Coleman, that we had been good at Stanford. I think my coach had been there for 16 years, 17 years, and he'd never finished out of the top 10 at Stanford in the national championships in the rankings. They're a little different than they are now, but still, we were a good team. I think our average finish was 6 or 7 over that time. So he had never been out of the top 10. And I came in with these big ideas. I told my athletic director when I was hired, I told my friends, I even told my recruits, I think we can win a national championship at Stanford. I don't see why we can't. We have good weather, great interest in local interest in tennis. It's going to be a hotbed. But that was in the year just before the indoor court craze. And so most of the great players were in Southern California, some in Texas, and some in Florida and elsewhere. But those were the main hotbeds.
Yeah.
So I recruited really hard in Southern California and got a few players there, but I missed some players. And I don't know in recruiting again whether I would have done it any differently with them, talking about making mistakes. I think they all wanted to go somewhere where there's an established program. And we had a good program, but the difference between USC and UCLA were perennially the top 2 teams in the country. Occasionally, Trinity University of Texas would sneak in there with kind of a maverick team that was really good. Like one year they had Buchholz, Freuling, and McKinley on the same team. Great team. But they didn't play any NCAAs that year. They were so good. When their college season ended, dual meet season ended, they hopped on a plane, and instead of playing the displays, went to England to get used to the grass for Wimbledon. Whereas UCLA players would play in the national championship and go straight to Wimbledon and play in the grass the next day. So Trinity was better than people really knew about. And I was recruiting against them, my first few recruits. A lot of disappointments in those days, almost making it, but then losing it, almost making it, losing it, getting a good player, and he transferred, getting another good player. He quit and turned pro. When I started, turning pro wasn't a problem. Yeah. In 1968, Open Tennis came along. A couple of years later, these players are making some money, and everyone was looking for the next great American. So they were offering contracts and all kinds of incentives as an agent to the next red-hot American out there. And so I was having to recruit them all over again once we were at school. And it was an interesting thing. I think one mistake is that I made, and that is that just because something's your goal, it doesn't make it a player's goal.
Right.
And I remember one of the first team meetings we had, it was a nice spring day, and we're sitting out there with my group of players, and we're just talking. I said, guys, someday we're going to win the national championship. And one of my players wrote in a book, and he ended up being in doubles finals with Roscoe Tanner.
Yes.
You're a good player, but he wasn't of the caliber we had later. And he said, I said, we're going to win someday. And we looked at each other and rolled our eyes and said, Coach, it's never going to happen here at Stanford. We just don't care that much about tennis, frankly. And of course, in those days, you had the Vietnam protests, Cambodia war bombings, Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King. It was a tough time to be a student. And if tennis wasn't already a priority, it was really tough to make it a priority in those days. So those were good challenges. We did happen to win it finally. Gave a real good effort in 72. And then almost won it in 70, and did win it in 73 with Roscoe Tanner and Sandy Mayer. In 74.
Yeah, and I want to talk about 74 here in just a sec, but to take a quick,
Real, let me finish up. But then in 77, we won it that year too. But also that was the year Al Davis's team won the Super Bowl.
I see.
And so I saw a quote in the paper. It said Al was the general manager and owner of the Raiders at that time. And this pre-season press conference, they were asking him, Al, you won it last year. You're going to win again this year. And he said, well, we won it last year, but it's really hard to win it again. It's like the Red Queen told Alice. You have to run as fast as you can to get somewhere. And once you get there, you have to run twice as fast to stay there. And that really hit on it for me. And I thought that to show I was relevant, and especially as I kept coaching year after year after year, I had to keep showing that I was relevant and doing things. I felt that every 4 or 5 years I had to do something that had never been done before that would impact tennis in general, not just my program, but in general, or something better than had ever been done before to raise the standard of it. So that was my goal, and we managed to do that. But that was really an important lesson for me.
Now, I know that first national championship you won, one of the things that you kind of mentioned as far as a mistake was talking about winning so much and wanting to win so bad and having that be the catalyst. With all due respect, I think it's fascinating to me to see that you really created a winning culture after that first national championship. But how were you able to kind of pull back that competitive spirit, that, you know, that will to win, and have it be more about the culture you've created rather than saying just go out and win?
A couple things. I was so obsessed with proving to myself, ego-wise, with winning a championship, proving that it could be done after I told everyone I thought it could be done. Even my own players who laughed at me because that goal was not synonymous to any goals they had. They couldn't understand that goal. It was way beyond them. As a leader, you have to be careful that you set goals they can relate to. And that was one big lesson I learned early on, an important lesson. But there were some side effects of that. That persistence of staying after it was a big one for the players to see. You asked about core values. I didn't really have any core values. I didn't say, okay, guys, here's what Stanford tennis is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't have any core values. I was coaching by the seat of my pants. I never read a coaching book on how to do this or how to do that. And I think many of us are in that same situation.
Right.
So it was interesting for me. And I had to learn that my goals better be synonymous with them. We finally reached this thing. I got the monkey off my back. I proved to myself, my ego, which was really in my way, that it could be done. And I became a much better coach. I thought I died and gone to heaven. I didn't care if we ever won another one.
Yep.
We proved it could be done. That was my goal. But all of a sudden, Roscoe turned pro, and I knew we weren't going to win it then. Sandy Mayer went, so Roscoe had already turned pro after a close second place finish. And then, so we won over Sandy Mayer playing number one, first time in 73. We won again in 74, but Sandy quit the team.
Yeah, and that's what I want to get into, because listen, you've talked about in your book and, you know, in articles that I've read, you know, one of your greatest teams was 1998, and you know you had the powerhouse team and blew people off the court. But in 1974, you really had to problem solve. You had a lot of moving parts that you had to navigate with your players in order to pull off something in what I believe is one of your most incredible national championships. Can you, as you were saying, walk us through the Sandy Mayer story?
It's like Murphy's Law. When everything's going well, something's going to happen. And you better be prepared for it. And in this case, I mean, I've been through a lot of pitfalls or a lot of disappointments with recruits ready to come to Stanford, then last minute deciding not to. One was whether Zan Gurry was going to be one of my first recruits, along with Stanley Passarell. That went back and forth with the two of them. Neither one of them wanted to be the only guy coming to Stanford. One would come if the other didn't. I ended up getting Stanley, losing Zan. Another was Dickie Stockton. He came to high school in Palo Alto last year for 1 month, and then left and went home because Stanford hadn't started yet. And he was going to be practicing every day with Stanford players. It was legal in that time, just across the street from Palo Alto High School. So I've been through a lot of ups and downs before trying to get this thing started. And then we finally did, and we had a great team coming back in 74. And I changed a little bit because I started talking to myself more in terms of getting better and and where we needed improvement, and improving rather than on winning. In 73, 72, 71, 70, I was saying, guys, if we do this, we can get here. We've got to do this so we can get here. That was putting unbelievable pressure on the guys, and I don't know whether it cost them any matches, but it wasn't a good way to coach. And I think I was a much better coach when I said, let's in my mind, let's think about improvement. But we'd improved a lot that year, and we're actually playing very, very well. And then just before the NCAA's, our final competition was our conference championship. And we had a little love triangle start to develop on the team between two players who were really good friends and a girl who was on the Foothill College women's team.
Okay.
And we go to our conference championship, and it happens to be in a town called Ojai, and they also have a junior college division. So she's down there also, and it hit the fan. I could see this developing a little bit, and I just, oh my gosh. And so at that point, Sandy just decided he couldn't stay on that team and be looking at one of his best friends every day across the net and still carry on his relationship. I don't want to get into something personal, but
yeah, right.
For whatever reason, he decided the best thing I can do for everyone's sake is to leave the team. So he never came back to the team after that. There goes the championship. Well, and then another guy got hurt and couldn't play with a wrist injury. So all of a sudden, John Whitlinger, who was number 3, moved up to number 1. That wasn't a team competition those days. We had only 4 players who could play in the singles. And your top 4. And Chico Hagee was number 6 or 7. He moved up to number 4. And they ended up playing each other in the finals. And we won enough matches to win it again.
Wow.
And that blew my mind. I mean, these guys just had big hearts. Jimmy Delaney was on the team the second year, Sandy the first year, and that year with John Whitlinger, won the doubles championship. Some other great players came through really well. Then we lost one in 76. We had a great chance to win. We were way ahead in individual points going into the quarterfinals. We just blew it. And that was my fault as a coach. So I cost us one there, and then we won it in 77 and 78 and took off.
Absolutely. And, you know, I know that you said you don't really have a syllabus to hand out to coaches being like, hey, here's how to have one of the greatest college tennis resumes ever. But one thing I think you excelled at that I'd like to dig into a little bit deeper that I can relate to myself is how you recruited. And, you know, your ability to send a letter to somebody that was, you know, just a simple gesture. It wasn't much, but being able to send those handwritten letters. Can you speak to where that came from? How did you develop that mindset of, hey, you know, this is a way that I can connect with people? Because in today's day and age, in 2023, I'm wondering if that same type of gesture would still be effective today. So can you maybe speak to how you came across that mindset, and do you think it would be effective in 2023?
Doubly effective because no one does it anymore. In those days, you couldn't send an email, and you only had so many phone calls a week you were permitted, but you could write them as much as you wanted.
Right.
I think I had an advantage because my writing is so bad, no one could understand what I said. I just thought about
Mine's pretty bad too. That's why I'm always speaking into microphones instead of writing stuff. That's right.
There you go. So anyway, but that we had a football coach. Stanford had a very tough time in athletics in the 50s and 60s, and even the early 70s. We just weren't winning in any sport. I think golf won it in 53, maybe. Swimming might have won it in 67, but we weren't even really close. Our football team, my last year in college, was 0-10 as an example when I was a student. So I came in, the negativism within our department amongst all the coaches and the athletes was really, really tough and rampant. We can't win because we can't get the good athletes in, or good athletes don't have time to be good students as well. We'll never win here at Stanford. There was just a ton of alibis. And hired just about the time I was a fellow for football named John Ralston.
Yes.
John was extremely positive. He coached at Denver, Broncos football. Extremely positive. Hired great people to be his assistants. And I got to know John pretty well because, in essence, we almost started together. He was a really positive guy. I never, ever heard him make an excuse. I never heard him do anything but accept the blame for any mistakes or losses himself, not put it on the players or on his assistants. We didn't have a big staff that time. We didn't have a lot of secretaries. He would answer all his emails and phone calls himself. He would do it immediately and promptly. He answered every note right when he got it. And that really had a big influence on me. And I'd like to think, to me, the biggest compliment would be that if people thought that the two of us had if we had some influence in changing the general perception of negativism to a positive attitude with Stanford athletics, because from that point on, Stanford does not look back.
Yeah, and it's, you know, positivity and conquering self-doubt and self-sabotage. Jeff has talked to me about that a lot, and he said a lot of that came from you. And it's really neat to hear, John Ralston being an impact to you. And
Absolutely,
it's really interesting tying in the Broncos. I'm really astonished to see all of the similarities between Stanford and the Denver Broncos right now. On the back of your book, you have Condoleezza, that gave you a nice endorsement on the back of your book. I know that you've had conversations with Jim Harbaugh, who we tried to get as a coach here, but he wanted to stay at Michigan. And I'm really impressed by, in tennis, it's not common that there's a lot of relationships with football. And I'm just curious, what, besides your past, what drew you to seeking out these staff members at Stanford that were in other sports that,
Yeah, I don't think it's just football. I think, coaches, there's something about the coaches fraternity. I think that, generally speaking, coaches are positive. They all see the glass is overflowing or much more than half full. I think most of them are really serious about loving the job because they feel they can have an impact on their kids. Sure, they want to win. Now they have to win. But if I were to pick someone as a friend and I had a choice just looking at the professions, I probably wouldn't pick an attorney as my best friend. I don't see a lot of smiles in that profession. Medicine, I don't know. But boy, coaches are usually upbeat, positive, and fun to be around. I know when we started out, my first year, I mentioned Stanford had never been out of the top 10. My predecessor, since they started ranking teams. And my first year, we were, I think, 16th in the country. My second year, we were 33rd in the country. I didn't even know that many schools had tennis teams.
Right.
I just lost another potential recruit who could have turned our program around. I didn't know where I was going. And then freshmen finally eligible in our conference. And I took 5 freshmen to the national championship. One played doubles only, and the other 4 were singles players.
You said all of them were freshmen?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
One of those after 1 year transferred because Roscoe Tanner hadn't signed his letter of intent yet.
Yes.
He said, "Who's coming in? It's just going to be me again." Paul Gherkin, he transferred to Trinity of all places, and ended up on the team that beat us in the finals that year. But Paul Gherkin, Matt Claflin, and 3 other freshmen from a couple of them Southern Cal, who were really good players. We finished, I think that year we were back in the top 10 at number 7 or 8 in the country with all freshmen. Their only competition was in the national championship. Boom. And so we were on our way at that point and had really turned a corner.
And I know you've recruited just so many outstanding players, and I am intrigued by the underdog stories, because what I can relate to is, I didn't have the national ranking. I never competed in a Colorado State championship, never qualified. I was never recruited, and I walked on to a Division I program, and I was taking scholarships rather than being given to me. And out of all of the years that you coached at Stanford, is there somebody that comes to mind that was, maybe a lower tier recruit, or I don't know if you guys had walk-ons, but, more or less just somebody that at the end of their, career, you look back and you're like, wow, that is somebody that did something pretty incredible. Does someone come to mind?
Yeah, a lot of players do. Myself, much like you, had no scholarship. I was a walk-on. Coach didn't know me from Adam. Made the freshman team barely, and so I stuck around and got a little better when I had a chance to play good players every day. Took advantage of that. We started out, they decided to fund me for scholarships, and they didn't fund my predecessor very much. But we ended up at one time, we had 8 players in scholarship.
Okay, wow.
And that was gigantic.
Yes.
Then they cut us back to 4.5 and gave the girls 8 to make up for football in Title IX.
Yes.
And that really helped. One really good outcome of that was it really leveled the player in college athletics teams, because if you took 3.5 guys that would have gone to SC, UCLA, or Stanford, then they all went somewhere else, 2 or 3 other schools. Then all of a sudden you have 6 schools, 7 schools who are good, not just 3 or 4. And that was a gigantic move. So then I would have players that I had no scholarship. I was recruiting. One comes to mind was a Triple Crown winner, Alex O'Brien.
Oh,
Came
wow.
to Stanford on no scholarship. Unless guys turned pro prematurely, he wouldn't get one. But he came and he won the NCAA singles, won the NCAA doubles, won the NCAA team championship.
Wow.
First Triple Crown winner since John Widlinger. And there were a lot of other players who came on half scholarships because I didn't have a full one available. And we made our living with those guys that did that. Jeff Salz's team.
Yeah.
Came on a half scholarship. And here's a guy that played number one for me and on a great team, as it turned out. You know, I think there's a part of this. I think today in the world, in tennis, we're given a lot.
Yes.
We get on a free list, so to speak, and we get free rackets. Or we get free shoes. We get a sponsor. Someone gets us a sponsor. We get these little idiocentric things, and we start thinking we're really good and really deserve a lot. And it's almost like we feel we're entitled. My parents have given all these kinds of lessons. I've gotten pretty good. I deserve a scholarship. So it becomes an ego thing. If they don't have a scholarship, who wants to say I'm going for free? It implies the coach doesn't care that much about you, doesn't think you're that good. And everyone else is telling you you're God's gift to mankind. So that was a tough thing to overcome. And we were successful in doing that, partly because at Stanford, the school is so great. A lot of other players had done it before other players and had won titles and championships with it. So that was really a big, big key for us. And I would say another thing really helped when we only had 4.5 scholarships. Our guys down the line were really good. We had a lot of depth.
Yeah.
All these guys weren't on scholarship either. I'm a coach and you're the athlete. If you're on scholarship, you're going to feel pretty good if there are only 4.5 out there because coach pretty much has to play you. But when you think about it, I'm going to play the guys who are playing the best at a given time because they're the ones who are going to save my job, not the people who are on scholarship and maybe didn't pan out as well or are going through a hard time or a rough patch as we all do in college. And it affects our play. So when you think about it, that's a fallacious argument. The coach is going to play who the best player is regardless.
I appreciate you walking me through just the landscape of how you recruit and scholarships and some of the underdog story. You know, one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm sure you do too, and I want to get your insight is, you know, my program, University of Northern Colorado, got cut amongst not just the men, but also the women's program about 3 years ago. And you see tennis actually, you know, with COVID, a lot of these programs are being cut. What are your thoughts about the landscape of college tennis today, knowing that it's not maybe at some schools a big revenue generating sport like a basketball or a football? What do you think the state of tennis is in 2023? And do you see more programs being cut, or do you see a bounce back at some point?
Well, first of all, I think Title IX is a great thing. I have 3 daughters who play college sports. 2 of them are captains of their respective teams. One in water, one in swimming, and one in volleyball. Another one, if she'd been able to keep on without knee surgery, might have been in tennis. So none of them were on scholarship, but they basically have benefited from the era of Title IX emphasis in women's sports. It's been a great thing. But on the other hand, in an effort to equalize things, football has so many scholarships. They took a lot away from the men. I hate to see the women on the team have training table where the men can't. I can't have 4 guys eating a special dining room if the other 8 guys can't.
Yeah.
Whereas most of the women's team can, as an example. I just can't. The fact they didn't do it by sport when they did Title IX and not try to put football in the mix. And there was a big argument about that when Title IX was enacted. But the fact that it was overall has really hurt sports like tennis. And so when you talk about drop programs, yes, a lot of women's programs are being dropped too, but men's programs have been dropped 2-1 over women's programs. So I think the men really, and especially early on, really paid a price on that. And still continue. There should be 6 scholarships for each. I feel very strongly about that. The other thing that I think we have to realize as coaches is that we are an endangered species in sports, and sports like tennis, not just tennis, and sports like tennis, because none of us are generating income generating sports. With that in mind, I started raising money for endowments in the early 80s. I started raising money for scholarships and so on. And when I left Stanford as director of tennis, we had built our stadium and for a total of over $20 million. We didn't have a penny from the university or the athletic department to help us, but they let us raise the funds. And that facility now would cost $80 million. But that was one thing that we did. And we also have our whole program endowed, the men's coaching position, the director of tennis position, the assistant coaching position. All of our 4.5 scholarships are endowed specifically for men's tennis. The surplus from the scholarships with the donor's permission has been used to endow our entire operating budget at the amount we're allowed to operate at. And there isn't a level we can operate at. And we have a maintenance endowment and a repair endowment for our facilities, which bring in over $100,000 a year. I left there with our program completely endowed. Now, whether it is today or not, I don't know. But when I left there, it was completely endowed specifically for men's tennis. And I'm really proud of that because I was running scared. That was one of the things Al Davis has meant so much to me for. If we want to ensure we're going to be here, and we don't know that, especially in sports like mine, we better get off our ass and take it on as a job responsibility and a job description, frankly. Even they say, oh, no, you'll always be fine, because that's not the case necessarily. And if you want to ensure your existence, you better do your best to get your program as funded as possible.
And one thing I'm so impressed with, Coach, is, yes, your ability to fundraise and support the game of tennis and Title IX, as you mentioned. But I actually got a chance to be a visitor to the tennis facility at Stanford. And this was back in the early 2000s. And I had a good friend of mine who played for Pepperdine. And this is when you guys were hosting the men's and women's national championship. And I got to watch him serve out the doubles point, and Pepperdine ended up winning the national championship. So can you maybe speak, just to the facility and what it means to you to even drive by it or, walk into it? I mean, what does that mean to you today after stepping away from being the director of tennis?
I really am proud of that. Our players really instrumental in this. We have, I think, in our athletic department, by far the highest percentage of donors of any sport are the men's tennis players. I think they really supported what we've done. I think that all our players, men and women together, have worked hard to interface with the public and go out and do activities with the public that have impacted their time a little bit on weekends, perhaps, but also have come back and gained us friends in the community that have been able to help us in our fundraising. I made very few asks directly in my fundraising. I might have made half dozen face-to-face asks. They're all notes, written notes. Hey, we're doing this. Would you be interested in helping us? And attached to a little flyer or something like that. We need your help. No one would be interested. Always, never one to put anyone in a corner, and only a few direct asks. But that's because we worked hard to build up a base of loyal fans along the way. And it's interesting because once we had the facility here, which probably is the nicest one in Northern California, then we could start holding events. So we held the Bank of the West here for 22 years, which had every top women's player in the world here, from Leisters to Sharapova to the Williams sisters to Davenport to Austin it was amazing. Celis, just on and on and on. Every one of them had played here. And that brought a lot of interest into our house area and school for tennis. Now they've decided they don't want to have big things like this on campus anymore. For outside events, I was fear of tax, property tax liability or what it might be. But
right.
Well, the Bank of the West got told goodbye about 5 years ago. So now the NCAAs were here twice. In fact, one of the things we did was to initiate the first NCAA combined men's and women's championship, which was a tremendous synergy. Really proud of that and how well it went. We raised $1 million in addition to our budget.
Wow.
So that really, really special. I'm really proud of that. And the streaming that went along with it, also with the side things we did. It was really, really special. But now they're going to be tearing down a facility.
Oh, wow.
And on the same footprint of land, putting in, it looks like 6 courts side by side, a total of 12, and covering the courts across the street, all 6 courts.
Okay.
So there are some good things coming out of it. We won't have a big stadium anymore. but we don't need to if we're not going to be able to have events, big events. So it's in a lot of ways be better, but in other ways it'd be a little more difficult.
Yeah, last piece I want to touch on, Coach. You know, you spoke about teaching aids, the movement that you have to help with concussions, and you're wearing the EPAT sweatshirt. I am just really impressed with how you've given back to East Palo Alto, and maybe that's from your roots of you know, being a farm guy and give an opportunity wherever you can. Can you maybe just speak to the mission of that outreach? And
by example, again, I think it's really important we talk about entitlement, that our players realize that they've earned some privileges, perhaps, but people made that possible because they gave up something to help them. And one of the biggest things we ever did was try to impress upon the players that they have a responsibility to give back to others. EPAT is underserved. It was 1983, I think it was, or 86, the homicide capital of the world per capita, mostly drugs, in a predominantly, in those days, Black area. And that's what started EPAT as an anecdote to that. And my team got very involved in that. And one of my players, Jeff Aarons, an All-American, started that program 35 years ago this year. And so I'm really proud of that. And then little things like the concussion thing, that's a nonprofit. I'm sitting in that office right now. Their first job was to instigate HIV education in 82 countries throughout the world, places that UNESCO and the Gates Foundation could not get into, and went out personally and got into those countries and developed the education, and took that, once it was firmly in place throughout the world, took that method and picked another topic, which was concussion education. So it's really fun for me to be volunteering full-time to, and my boss takes $1 a year, and that's it, to be developing things for coaches, for students, and for their parents of all ages, and awareness of concussion. And it's amazing the steps are being taken now in this regard throughout the world, actually.
That's a unbelievable movement, and I appreciate you diving in on that outreach. And from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate all you do with that. And that leaves me with just one last question. Okay, the obvious, 17 team national champions, 10 individual, 7 in doubles. May I ask, how many Wife of the Year awards did your wife get being by your side throughout all of those championships? Because
I've had 2 wives, Coleman, true confession.
I mean, I'm telling you, the support from your significant other has to be tremendous. So can you?
Let me go back a little bit. My first child was born when I was playing in the Northern California Intercollegiate Championship.
Okay.
Before the ITA, hosted by Stanford at that time, in that particular year, and I was running back and forth from the hospital. I think I just had beaten Whitney Reed, who was number 1 in the world in the United States at the time, played for San Jose State. I just had a win over him in doubles, ran the hospitals, saw the childbirth, came back. Once the child was born, okay, and the tournament director was a friend of mine. He postponed the match, didn't default me. He said, "No, he's coming." And then my second child was born in a tournament I was running, a big tournament at Foothill Junior College for out of the area people, and she was born during that tournament, so I didn't even see her childbirth because no one else could be able to run the tournament at the time. It was a one-man job. My poor first wife had to put up with all of that. My second wife was a coach, actually. I hired her because she'd worked in the teaching program Tom and I ran.
Yeah.
And we would hire and train teachers. And I'm really proud of the people who work in that program, really some great, great people in the world of tennis today even. And so she understood a little more. She won the first women's championship in any sport at Stanford during Title IX and started a whole string of things there. So, but she didn't like coaching. So after 4 years, she was out of it. She didn't want to do it anymore. But I must say, they and my kids deserve a lot because they've been through a lot. And
yeah,
it's one of the big things you have to face in any job. And my job's always been my hobby.
Right.
You can't be the best coach in the world. You can't be the best. When people say be the best you can be, I qualify that, always say, be the best you can be commensurate with the amount of time you want to put into it.
Yes.
So you can't be, if I were the best parent I could be, the best parent I could be, and the best father I could be, I wouldn't have a job. If I were the best I could be in my job even. I wouldn't come home to family at night.
Right.
So you can't be the best you can be. You can be the best you can be commensurate with the time you put into it. Hopefully you balance it a little bit, but it's hard for me when my living was dependent upon how hard I worked, because I never was paid very much or that much by Stanford, or nor at the club or high school teaching I did. So that was a part of it. And the other part of it was I was driven that way. The other part of it, I really loved what I was doing. Yeah. And when you innovate, rather than just open a can of balls and tell someone to step into a forehand or turn or whatever, that takes a lot of time to germinate the idea and then to design it and address it and bring it to fruition. But I always really enjoyed doing that. And it really was a great hobby for me. I've been very, very blessed, Coleman.
Coach Gould, it's been a tremendous honor to spend some time with you today. I've taken a tremendous amount of knowledge away from our conversation, and I know the listeners have too. Thank you so much for joining the BTB Project, and continue to inspire and encourage, motivate, and support the way that you have, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you, Coleman, and keep up the great work. I loved your interview with Jeff Salzenstein. You couldn't have picked a better subject, and just a great man. And that's the kind of person that I really, really enjoyed working with at Stanford.
Excellent. I appreciate you, Coach.